Have a really good think, because somebody you know could earn you a lot of money for very little effort. Think, who do you know that wants to buy a property in Spain? A colleague, a mate, someone in your family, a friend of a friend? If you know someone, go to welcome-estates.com and click the Refer a Friend link. If they buy, you'll pocket a nice chunky thank you from one of Spain's leading estate agents. T's and C's apply. All details at welcome-estates.com.
Hello, all you hardcores out there, how you doing? It's Russ here from Porky's Corner, the biggest gob in sport. Welcome to part 2. Staying with the heavyweights then, Julian. Zhang. They're all going on about this Wilder, Joshua, Usyk, Fury, 4-man job. Do you think that a case could be made for Zhang to replace Joshua?
Well, if I was looking after Anthony Joshua, as I said,
first substitute if the tournament happens.
Well, if you were looking after AJ and you were his handlers and you were looking for a summer fight, would you take Zhang?
Yes.
Would you take Zhang?
He's got to get a win on board now.
I think
guy.
Style-wise, that might be a bad fight for him, but do you know what? Would he be a good substitute? I mean, there's a real argument to say that Anthony Joshua's not earned himself a shot in this tournament, isn't there? Because obviously he's a massive name. He's going to get an opportunity. But if you said who's earned an opportunity recently, because you can't live off beating Klitschko and beating whoever, can you, for all your whole career? You have to be relevant in the last year to 2 years.
Klitschko.
Yeah, so he can't live off that forever. So if the question is, has Anthony Joshua earned his place, other than being a massive name in a massive unification tournament, you'd have to say, no, he's not earned his shot. But has Zhang earned his shot? Yeah, because he's just beaten an unbeaten mandatory in really impressive style.
Yeah.
But
British Commonwealth European champion.
Yeah, but Zhang's about as fashionable as a pair of flares, isn't he? So he's not going to get an opportunity, which is what we've said before. If you're putting a big elimination tournament on, it's not just about being the best fighters, is it? It's about who gets the most hits online, who bring the most revenue. And you couldn't obviously leave Usyk out of it because he's a fantastic, brilliant fighter. But Wilder, what's Wilder done recently? He knocked out Robert Alenius, who's an old man. He's knocked him out. Apart from that, what has he done? Been hammered twice. AJ's been dominated twice, albeit these guys have been beat by good fighters, of course they have. But what about the guys who are unbeaten? What about the people who are putting in performances more recently? Why aren't they in this tournament?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from with that.
I'm just asking the question. I'm just saying you've got to have a run of form, haven't you? You can't base everything based on the fact that you're a big name. AJ, in the last, 6 fights, 3 wins, 1 knockout over a guy who was 39-year-old. And his last fight wasn't that impressive against a guy who was nothing special. So if you look at the run of form, Anthony Joshua's last 2 to 3 years, would you say he's earned his place in a massive elimination tournament with the 4 best heavyweights in the world?
No, and I'd also say that he's gun shy now.
Yeah, I'm not hating on the guy because he's really impressive career. Done amazing.
Yeah.
But recently, what's he done? What has he done recently?
Note, he's done zilch.
Nothing. He's been knocked out. He's been beat soundly on points twice. And he's had a grab and jab points win over a 20-stone Ruiz, who'd been training in the fridge. And he knocked out an old guy, Pulev, an old man, who'd been put on ice for a while. And now he's just had a pretty unconvincing points win. This is not the form of a scintillating fighter, is it? In his prime.
No, it's the former somebody that were the papering over cracks, aren't they?
Yeah, and of course, listen, everybody knows boxing's business, but it's purely business now. It's not entertainment. It's purely down to business. And who makes the most money? AJ is one of the highest paid athletes in the world. AJ makes a hell of a lot more money than Dubois or Zhang or Joyce or Hrgovic or any of these fighters. It's business ultimately.
Yeah. Where do you see Dillian Whyte's role in all this now? Because he's like the ugly sister in all this, isn't he?
He seems to have gone out of favour, doesn't he, Dillian Whyte? Was somebody that were talking about the Joshua third fight being a big summer blockbuster. That's all gone quiet. Rumours about Dillian Whyte maybe going to Sky, looking for a big fight on that platform. I think he's out of contract now with Eddie. Does he do something with Warren? I don't know, but what I do know is there's not a lot of clamour right now for Dillian Whyte, is there? And it shows what I was saying earlier about the fickle nature of boxing, because 1 minute you're hot, and then the next minute you're not, and nobody's talking about you. And very, very few people are talking about Dillian Whyte right now.
Yeah, I mean, he had that bit of intense beef with McCauley. Did you see it?
No, I just heard about it. I smile about this stuff, but I won't repeat it on here, but there was some quite unsavoury things said, wasn't there, about McCauley? But I don't know anything about that. I've not heard anything, but
yeah,
it was pretty unsavoury, really. I mean, do you need to say those things? I don't know. I don't know what McCauley's done, but I'm not interested.
Do you think McCauley's like a bogeyman now since he's done Yoka?
Well, thing is with McCauley, right? He doesn't do anything great, but he's pretty durable. He hits quite hard. He's one of the quite fast hands, hits quite hard, durable. He's got an ugly style, and he's a long night for anybody. And because we're in a risk-averse heavyweight division right now, where nobody will take any kind of chance they don't need to, apart from Joe Joyce, who has to be commended for that, whilst not very bright either. Who's going to fight McCauley? Why would you fight McCauley if you didn't need to?
Yeah.
But then again, that would be a good fight for AJ. That would be these tough 10-rounders and tough 12-rounders that they're saying he needs because he's still got the L plates on. Someone like McCauley would be perfect for him.
Yeah.
And I think AJ would beat McCauley, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think Dillian Whyte beats McCauley? Or is it a 50-50?
It's definitely a 50-50 fight, that, isn't it? It'd be quite an ugly fight. I think with Dillian Whyte, he's somewhat on the slide, and he's been knocked out brutally, hasn't he, in 2 of his last 4 or 5 fights.
Yeah.
Albeit Fury were obviously a class above. But then you look what Povetkin did, and I don't know, there's miles on the clock with Dillian Whyte. He's had a lot of hard fights as well, hasn't he? And even fights that should have been easier have been wars. So, and I don't know this, by the way, I'm just surmising. I bet Dillian Whyte is like Derek Chisora. I bet when Dillian Whyte is in training, I bet every single sparring session he has is a war.
Yeah.
There's miles on the clock with Dillian Whyte. Is
the miles on clock with Derek?
Gone round the clock a few times with Del Boy, hasn't he? Derek will do whatever he wants, won't he? If he wants to carry on fighting, he'll do that. I thought he had quite a good role with the Tommy Fury. Who was the guy? Forget the YouTube guy. He had that kind of, he had that kind of role as host, didn't he, in Saudi? And when I saw that, I thought it was quite nice seeing Del Boy over there adding a bit of pizzazz to that event. And I thought maybe he's got that personality that maybe his life after boxing, well, after being a fighter with Derek, and maybe he could do that type of thing. But who knows? I mean, I don't object to seeing Derek Chisora in a ring. What I object to seeing is Derek Chisora in a ring with somebody who can do him damage like Tyson Fury. That's not a good career move. He probably needs to drop down a couple of levels if he wants to carry on boxing, because we know with Chisora's not world class. Chisora's not been world class for several years, and you could argue that Chisora's never been world class. So I don't know, maybe he could fight Fabio Ward or someone like that.
Yeah. Where do you see
Fraser Clark?
Pardon?
Fraser Clark, Chisora. That's a good fight.
Do you think it's Big Fraser against Chisora is a good fight?
It's a great learning fight for Fraser, because one thing's for sure, he's not going to blast Chisora out of there, is he? But then again, he's still, I don't think it'd be a great fight for Del Boy. But although Big Fraser needs to get a move on now, doesn't he? I mean, he can't be fighting the guys he's been fighting, because this is an elite level fighter who's had 105 international fights. So he's boxed at such a massively high level, hasn't he? Fraser Clark. He should be fighting the Chisoras of this world.
Yeah, I want to see Big Fraser do well. I know I gave him a bit of stick.
I like him.
Do you know what I mean? Because he's a big, giant softy, isn't he, really? He's like Max, isn't he?
I just get the impression, I know I've said this before, I get the impression he's going to be half a level below that kind of top 3 or 4. I don't think Fraser's got the gears or maybe that numbing power that's gonna get him to that kind of, you know, the chalice, the golden chalice of the heavyweight division. I don't think he's
like a Chisora type career.
I think he'll be in the good fights, but I don't know. I look at him, and like I say, he turned pro quite late, and then I look at Jared Anderson, who just looks brilliant. Does that kid? Yeah, I know his time will tell, but I look at the potential. I always look at potential. Who's got 7, 8, 9, 10 years on a career? And do you think you could see Big Fraser boxing in 10 years' time? I don't, but someone like Jared Anderson, I think, would just ping him something silly, honestly.
Yeah.
He can fight, that kid. He really can fight.
Yeah. Bring back Bean. Save Bean. Do we need Bean?
No.
I'm worried about Bean.
Genuinely, I hope the guy's all right, because it's almost like an unsaid name, isn't it? No one ever mentions Adam Smith now. And it was really a big part of boxing's face in the last, 20 years? And I don't know what struggles he's got. I genuinely don't know what struggles he's got. I tend to stay away from that personal side of people's lives. But if he has got his problems, and clearly he has, I hope he's well. I don't miss his commentary, but I do miss him with a microphone, you know, on the build up to fight week. He was quite good. He used to get excited, didn't he? We all laughed at how his excitement levels got a bit ridiculous, didn't they?
Rough,
I hope the guy's okay, genuinely.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, well, let's all wish Bean well.
And if he has got problems, we've all faced problems over in our life, Russell, haven't we? So let's give the guy a bit of space.
Would Johnny Horsecock Nelson step over Bean to get to the big seat though at Sky?
Normally, I would say yes, because I've said to you before, everyone does what's best for them. It's all about power. I always got the impression that Johnny Nelson had a lot of loyalty towards Adam Smith, genuine loyalty. Maybe I'm being naive. Maybe I'm just being a little bit silly in saying that, but he always, I don't know. There's something about, this might be a reach, yeah. I've only ever seen Johnny Nelson 3 or 4 times, been on Sky, had boxing on Sky shows. I've nodded at him. I've never had a conversation with him. But I always look at how Johnny Nelson, whatever you say about Johnny Nelson, the admiration he had for Brendan Ingle, for example. He was so loyal to Brendan Ingle, wasn't he? All through his career. And so he should have been, because Ingle turned him from a guy who couldn't win for love nor money to a world champion for several years and earned a lot of money. But he always talks about Brendan Ingle with an absolute fondness. And I get the impression with Johnny Nelson, you're not going to hear this, you might not like this, it's just an instinct. I get the impression with Johnny Nelson, he's a loyal kind of guy.
Yeah, well, let's hope that if Johnny gets it, He'll share them Sky dates out amongst all his pals in Sheffield.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think there's something about them what's probably got a bit more loyalty. And it's not often you hear me waxing lyrical about Johnny Nelson, but I think he's as loyal as it gets in boxing.
Well, he stayed with Brendan all that time, so
Absolutely.
we have to cut him a bit of slack, old Nelson, the Nelson boy. Right, is boxing in decline? Boxing is now ranked the 8th most popular sport in the UK and was previously top 5. The OIC have removed boxing from the 2028 Olympic agenda. How will this impact the future of boxing? BKB is growing rapidly. MMA and in particular the UFC is growing continually. Has boxing had its day?
Boxing, the big events will always be big. We've seen this with the stadium fights, the arena fights. When you get the big names together, boxing can be magnificent and can be huge. But when you filter down to the next level, to the smaller shows, small hall shows, if you look at the views, what they're getting now on these events, I think there's definitely a decline. I think so many reasons for that. I could probably do 5 videos in itself. But if you look at the one thing about boxing, what we've always known, right? We're not telling anybody any secrets when we say boxing's corrupt. Yeah. Just because boxing's corrupt, that doesn't mean everybody in boxing is corrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dennis will tell you that. There are good, honourable people in boxing, but there are a lot of people in professional boxing who are corrupt and they don't fly straight. But what we always thought, Russell, because you mentioned the the International Olympic Committee and the IBA who look after amateur boxing, what we always believed, not me and you, because we've been around boxing for a long time, but the general public believe professional boxing's rotten, it's run by the mob, but amateur boxing is clean and there's a code of conduct. Now, you and I know that amateur boxing is rotten from the ground up. And again, that is not saying everybody involved in boxing is rotten, because I've been in dozens of amateur gyms with good people, give up their time and work hard. But what the International Olympic Committee have found with the IBA is what I've just said. Boxing is rotten. The finances of World Amateur Boxing, the judges, the incompetence, the corruption is so widespread that there's a very, very good chance that boxing won't be reinstated in the 2028 Olympic Games. I believe that's in LA, actually. I think it's in the States, is that Olympics. Now, that is massive news, isn't it? It kind of gone under the radar. But what we're effectively saying is not only is professional boxing generally corrupt, but amateur boxing now we know is corrupt. There's reports being done on this. What say it's not worthwhile of being an Olympic sport. So after 120 years, boxing might be taken away from the Olympic Games. Well, it has been taken away. It's been taken off the agenda. Now that's massive news. You think of the Olympics. You think of Ali, Fraser, Ray Leonard. Even Audley Harrison, you think of Anthony Joshua, James DeGale, you think of the heritage of Olympic boxing. Now, how much weaker will boxing be if we can't follow the stories of the Olympians through their passage into professional boxing? Because Anthony Joshua in London became a household name, didn't he? Yeah. Everybody was talking about him. So I know it's a long answer, but you've got the mismanagement of professional boxing, best fighters not fighting each other, corruption all down the line. You've got the administration of boxing in the UK is very poor. The British Boxing Board of Control are pretty poor, let's be honest. And we're now finding that boxing is struggling. So what's happening is people are turning away from the sport in their droves. Boxing's still a popular sport, okay? It still is a popular sport. It's the most popular of all contact sports. But in terms of the depth of boxing, as I've said, from the large stadiums all the way down to the local amateur shows in the working men's clubs, it's not as strong as it used to be. Mixed martial arts is growing. It's growing you know, it's the fastest growing sport in the world. I know that there's been some not very great ratings for the last few UFC events, but generally other contact sports are growing. Boxing, I think, is in decline. It's just as much an instinct as anything else. And I don't know. I think the fact that it's being removed from the Olympic program is massive. We've now got eight belts per division, Russell, haven't we? We've got, you know, the ones, we've got the BABC, IBF, WBO, WBO, Interim, WBA Super, Ring Magazine. We've got an absolute shower of shite in terms of the organisations governing boxing. We've got a massive problem with drugs cheats. We know we have. It's a dirty sport, not just in terms of what goes on behind the scenes and the corruption between managers, promoters, and the organisations. We've got dirty fighters in dirty gyms, and it's had so many black eyes recently. I think it's in decline, Russell. Boxing won't die. Boxing will never die. It'll always exist in some form or another. But it's in a bad situation, and you got diehards like myself who's been involved in the sport who I can take it or leave it right now. Long answer. Sorry about that.
No, I see where you're coming from on that. It's we know Olympic boxing for Olympics and that. I mean, what's going to happen in years to come? What will happen? Are they going to appeal it or what?
I think they're having to represent boxing. I think the IBA, who obviously govern world amateur boxing, are having to appeal the decision and represent it. But what they've found themselves is they know it's rotten. They know it's rotten all the way down the line. And, you know, the one thing that the Olympics is all about fair sport, a clean sport, which is why obviously the testing scandals that they've had over the years have just been like catastrophic for the Olympics. But the testing's as good as it's ever been. But they're not worried about dirty boxers now. They're worried about just the fact that the sport is governed by a load of crooks. And it's just, I can't imagine the Olympics without boxing. I just can't imagine it. And I think it'll be catastrophic to the sport. Because that's the one thing you do, isn't it? You want to watch the journey and the story of the Olympians coming through the sport. And people I think you were saying Richard started watching a lot more mixed martial arts now, hasn't he?
Yeah, and Watson's a kid now, Richard.
Yeah, well, why not? I mean, I'm not
So
saying
does Gary does.
Yeah, I'm not saying MMA, and good for those guys for supporting, you know, athletes. That's a tough sport. I'm not saying MMA is clean, by the way. I'm not suggesting that. But what I'm saying is people are just getting bored of boxing because we've said we've got this situation now. We've got more rubbish. And what I will say is we continually, criticize boxing and where boxing's wrong. We've also had some really good matches recently and some good matches getting made. So we need the Davises and Garcia fights. We need the Devin Havey and Lomachenko fights. We need all these fights. We need Bivol. We need Bitabaev. We need these fights to keep boxing going and to keep it relevant, because at the moment there's not a lot to get excited about.
No, they're in. Well, we've got Zhang Joyce rematch coming up, haven't we?
It's like watching two mummies fight each other, isn't it? I mean, it's not my cup of tea. I think the Haney-Lomachenko fight, that'll be absolutely brilliant. I believe Sky Sports are showing that one. So it's been a long time since I've got up in the middle of the night to watch boxing, but I might just do for that one.
Well, I mean, do you think Joyce could turn it around?
What you have to ask yourself in a fight like that is, what can he do differently? And what Joyce did is what Joe Joyce does. He walks forward, he takes as many shots as he can, and he wears you down and clubs you into defeat. That's what Joyce does. I didn't like the weight he came in at. I will say that. I thought there was a picture of him on the scales doing the tenths, and you could almost see his rib cage. And Joyce is a big lump, isn't he? Yeah. He's a big heavyweight. I mean, Zhang's 20 stone, but Joyce looked too light for me. So I would certainly question that. But just everything about that fight was just so wrong. And I mentioned this when I did a little breakdown myself, that what Joyce does is quite unusual, is he moves to his right. You know, his fighters generally go, orthodox fighters generally go clockwise 80-90% of the time. And Joyce spends a lot of his time moving to his right. He goes anti-clockwise. Now that's lethal against the southpaw. You do not move to your right against a southpaw who's got a really solid backhand like Zhang. And he was continually in that firing line and then shifting across to his right. And I just thought it was such bad advice, bad preparation. And it's a bit like David Price against Tony Thompson. Can you really turn it around that quick? Immediate rematches are not always a good thing, mate, because what you could look at if Joyce now, if Joyce gets absolutely wiped out by Zhang again, what does that do for his confidence and where does he go?
Well, he'll have to drop down to British level, won't he?
Yep. And then you just, what happens then? So it just shows, doesn't it, that
You get Johnny Fisher knocking him about in 2 years.
you can see it, can't you? You can see these young kids coming through and then he'll get served up. And it's one of those things. Joyce is a little bit like Big Fraser, which is why I understand why fighters hang around in the amateurs for so long. If you've got the GB spot as a heavyweight, as a super heavyweight, for example. So look at Fraser, stayed around till he was 30. Joyce did the same, and they got the Olympic medals. I get it. They become almost billionaires when they turn over because they've got an Olympic medal in the sexy division. They're going to make a hell of a lot of money. But in terms of career progression, you know, you form the majority of your style through a certain age. These guys are turning pro so late, you're not seeing much evolution in their style. And that's part of the problem. So they've got massive Olympic pedigree. They stay amateur, they get paid, they get a salary, they're on podium squad, they get the bed and board, all the meals paid for. Every single thing is sorted out. But they hang around in the hope that if they don't get an Olympic medal in the first round of qualifiers, they do it the second time of asking. But they do that, and then they're turning pro at 31, 32. It's too late, mate. It's way too late.
I think that'll be their undoing. Well, it has been.
100% absolutely will be their undoing, no doubt about it.
Do you think then that Peter Fury having Huey turn pro at a young age were good, or do you think he could have done with another 4 years?
Well, Huey Fury is a classic example, isn't he? Huey Fury would have never got selected for GB squad. You know, Peter Fury would know that I don't know much about Huey Fury's amateur record, but what I do know is there's a lot of nepotism in terms of GB selection. Of course, good kids get through to GB, but I know kids and I work with kids who have got victories over GB kids and they've never got through the GB training. They've been let go. So there's a lot of nepotism around it. So Huey Fury would have never been a fashionable amateur. And I can say that without watching any of his amateur fights. So what you do is you look at someone like Huey and you turn him over. You turn him over young, and he matched him hard. It's done him no harm whatsoever. And what he's still got is he's got loads of time. But Huey Fury's got a benchmark because Huey Fury's been in with, was it Joseph Parker and was it Pulev? Pulev, yeah. So he's been in with those guys those guys at a young age before he physically matured, before he's got his man strength, before he learned. He's still learning and day in, day out. But he's gone the unfashionable route because he's never going to get the glamour of being an Olympian. So he's done a little bit like Tyrone Nurse did the same. Tyrone Nurse, as an amateur, were beating England internationals for fun, but he never got selected to fight for England. It's just how it works, Russell. It's just the game, how it works, and the irony we've been talking about, the corruption with the international boxing. It's massive, and you get very similar in boxing. So Fury has done the right thing. He's turned him over, matched him tough, and as I was going to say, what he's done by matching Huey Fury tough is Huey Fury knows at a very young age where he needs to be, and he knows he's not there yet, but he knows what's required to get there. Whereas Joe Joyce, for example, we've just seen get turned over. Joe Joyce now knows what he needs to do to get there. The guy's 38-year-old. He hasn't got enough time to get
He's
where
9 years older than Huey.
So Huey's got all the time in the world because he's already world class. There's no rush. He just needs to be active, fight regular, and at some point he'll get his opportunity. He might have to wait 3 years, but when he gets his opportunity, you think of, as I said before, you think of the rounds in the bank that he's got, not just in the ring, but in the gym, traveling around for world-class sparring. That can only pay off well.
Yeah.
It can only serve him well when it gets tough, because these other guys, when they get into these firefights, they haven't got the hard fights to call back on.
Yeah, yeah.
Experience is everything. That's like Larry Holmes had so much experience traveling the gyms. He wasn't protected, was his sparring partner for Ali and Fraser and Foreman, and part of his education. And it's about being. I do believe, honestly, it's so important that you have those early formative years, because what we're not talking about is being. We're talking about being a good professional boxer with longevity, aren't we?
Yeah.
And I know going back to the old days, but if you look at Marvin Hagler had 50 odd fights before he fought for a world title.
Yeah.
Massive experience learning his craft.
Yeah.
And now what happens is, because of the setup that we've got on the evolution of boxing, you get fighters like Anthony Joshua, they win world titles, they get beat and they say, he's still a working pro. So you either go the rich route and a shitload of money, but you don't develop as a professional boxer, or you go the traditional route, you don't get a lot of money, you get matched hard, but you learn your trade when it matters in a professional ring.
Yeah. Well, I think Huey will come again. I get a lot of stick for saying that, but I think he'll come again.
Well, do I think Huey Fury would potentially be the best heavyweight in the world? Probably not. But do I think he could be one of the 5 or 6 best heavyweights in the world? Yeah, I do. And the main thing is when he gets his shot, he's ready for it, because he's been there before, hasn't he?
Yeah.
And that's all. And he's got a good coach, great coach, and a guy who looks after him, and a guy who cares for him, because it's his dad, isn't it?
Yeah. Beefy, we'll finish off on Beefy Smith and Eubank.
Right. I call a lot of predictions right. I get a few wrong. I never get Chris Eubank Jr. right. For what reason? I always talk about the man in the mirror moment. For what reason? I've always seen more potential in Chris Eubank Jr. than he's delivered. I thought he might beat Billy Joe Saunders. I just thought there was something about him. Even though he had very little rounds under his belt, I thought he'd beat Saunders. I thought Eubank Jr. would beat George Groves. And I thought Eubank Jr. would beat Liam Smith. I've got a blind spot, Russell, where Eubank Jr. is concerned.
Yeah.
So, do I think he beats Liam Smith? No. And that means that he probably will.
Well,
can't call his fights at all for whatever reason. I've got this, like some fighters are just, I suffer with Chris Eubank Jr., what he suffers with himself. Chris Eubank Jr. is not as good as he thinks he is. And Chris Eubank Jr. is not as good as I think he is. So it's a funny one.
Oh, you rate Eubank?
I did, that's the point. I really rated him and he lets me down every time. We have to be honest and say he's not world level. He can't be.
Yeah,
he can't.
Got a full chance, hasn't
he? He can't be. He just can't be world level.
He's just got that hype around him, hasn't
he? Yeah, he's got. Look, the couple of the guys he's beat, the timing was all right for him to beat those guys.
Abraham and De Gale.
Yeah, the timing was absolutely perfect. They've been softened up before him, haven't they? But I get him wrong every single time. What I will say is Roy Jones Jr. is the absolute worst coach in the world for Eubank Jr. I don't know who made that appointment whatsoever. It was horrendous.
How? How is he a bad coach?
Well, you got to get the coach who's right for you. It's not about getting the best coach. But what happens if you look at, okay, I'll look at Roy Jones Jr. Okay, how old's Chris Eubank? 33, 34?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Roy Jones was red hot. He was the best fighter in the world for about 10 years. Roy Jones's game was all about his reflexes, hands down. It was all about the left, triple, 4 left hooks, 5 left hooks, super quick hands, brilliant timing, brilliant anticipation. That timing and those reflexes are a gift, like Nazim Ahmed. Like everybody tried to become Nazim Ahmed after Nazim Ahmed, and it only worked for Naz. Roy Jones' style only worked for Roy Jones because it worked with his attributes. The attributes that Chris Eubank Jr. needs to be Roy Jones Jr. He might have been closer to those attributes when he was 27, 28, 29. But when you are a reflex fighter, you have to have sound fundamentals. And Roy Jones later in his career didn't have those sound fundamentals because it was all about the reflexes. So Chris Eubank Jr. at 33, 34, he needs a coach who's going to give him sound fundamentals. When I'm talking about sound fundamentals, I'm talking about being able to defend in the pocket. You know, he pulled out against Liam Smith several times. He pulled out with that low left hand and his chin in the air. Those are sound fundamentals. You pull out in the pocket.
Liam Smith saw that early, didn't he?
Absolutely. He saw him how he was pulling out. You know, if you look at Floyd Mayweather and Bernard Hopkins, right? They weren't traditional high-hand type of fighters, but they knew how to defend in the pocket. I'm obsessed in defending in the pocket. They knew how to defend in the pocket. Eubank Jr. hasn't got a clue how to defend in the pocket. So he's not going to learn that from Roy Jones Jr. It's just impossible. I just thought it was the worst appointment ever. And that style was horrendous. Dropping all that weight might have finished him. I said that at the time, didn't I? The 157. I said, you might be looking at a career-ending weight right there, what he did to himself. So being weak at that weight and that awful Roy Jones style, what he's trying to teach him is just, it's a disaster. So if he's still with Roy Jones Jr. for that rematch, and I don't know if that's the case or not, the Smith brothers and his coach, they must be licking the lips, because what do you say? If you don't learn from history, you can then to repeat it. And it's a game. It's what I've said, is there's certain things you have to learn to be able to do, to be able to adapt. And I don't think Eubank Jr. has ever learned them. So will they get ironed out again? Likely. Would a Eubank Jr. win surprise me? Not massively, because I think at this stage in his career, I think Liam Smith's European level, by the way. But it just shows, doesn't it? It's these immediate rematches, they're not always a good thing for boxers.
He's got Buddy McGirt in his corner. No, he hasn't. Sorry, he's got that Joe McInally in his corner.
Good solid coach.
Trainer. So we're going to see, aren't we?
Yeah, we're going to see. But unless, I mean, it's one of those, isn't it? It's like, if you're going to go with a new coach and teach an old dog new tricks, you need time to bed in. But I guess the question is, what can Chris Eubank Jr. do differently that he didn't do last time? And also, and if the defense isn't there, the mid-range to close-up defense isn't there, and the punch resistance has gone, it doesn't say much, does it? And Liam Smith's a good, solid fighter, but it's not this kind of like brutal KO puncher that he looked like last time.
No, Ian.
Bad fight for Eubank.
Well, he'll get another payday, so he won't be bothered.
They can probably still do the Ben fight at some point, can't they? They'll drag it out.
Oh, you bet your bottom dollar they will. Okie dokie then. Well, listen, you take care, Julian.
You too, mate. You have a good evening, Russell.
All the best. Thanks for coming on.
Take care, guys.
Cheers, mate. And that was Julian. And I want to thank everybody for watching that fantastic video I put out the other day, the Callum Connor video. Welcome Estates first signing. Welcome Estates. You know who they are, don't you? Well, if you want to be a promoter on social media, get in touch, porkycorner@mail.com. Got a minute to win it. cheaper than a lottery ticket, isn't it, Gaza? Okie dokie. Peace out.
Porky's Corner is proud to be sponsored by Spartan Site Solutions. They are specialists in civil engineering and demolition contracts for the construction industry. Interested parties should visit their website or contact Porky's Corner for a referral at porkycorner@mail.com.